Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. A thriller, a twisted tale of the darkness lurking in society. A story of the night, all beginning with the nigh convoluted imaginings of the Japanese Shakespeare, Hirohiko Araki sensei. Welcome to 19th century England, to where Bizzare first happened. What's cracking, guys? Samuel607 here, throwing at you a new JoJo's video. So today, I'm gonna be looking at part 1 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the Phantom Blood Saga. Now, before we dive in, I'm warning you, I'm spoiling part 1 horrendously. If you want to go in with no spoilers, I'm afraid this isn't the video for you. But if you're willing to entertain them, I go into such great detail that you could feasibly skip straight to part 2, though I wouldn't recommend it if you actually want to get a feel for the storytelling firsthand. It's still worth giving a watch after getting through my video, and I really hope you do. Now, without further ado, let's get into why JoJo's is storytelling of the highest tier.
Do you feel the pulse?
A tragic accident sets in motion the story brilliantly, managing both to ground it in reality, as the mortality of the characters is put on full display, as well as institute the somber tone to be anticipated henceforth. Herein lay the most fated of encounters, that of Dario Brando and the dying Joestar family. Having stumbled upon the scene of an accident, one Mr. Brando takes advantage of the situation to loot the possessions of the now deceased family sprawled on the scene. Only they're still alive. Mr. George Joestar and his son are the only survivors, and as he briefly gains consciousness, he mistakes Dario for his savior and swears to repay this debt, much to the pleasure of the vile opportunist. Fast forward 12 years, and Dario passes away due to illness, and has sent his 13-year-old boy, DIO, to Mr. Joestar's household, where he's welcomed lovingly. However, he makes a quick enemy of his son, Jonathan, attacking his dog and instigating violence on the spot. To cut a long story short, DIO proceeds to antagonize Jojo, distancing him from his father so he'd be the beloved one, all while taking away his friends and his love interest's first kiss. Down to his core, DIO was despicable, and all his wrongdoings directed towards Jojo culminate in a heated scuffle at home. It's broken up before things get too far, though meanwhile, the ominous stone mask from the opening sequences of the anime makes another appearance, piquing interest from readers and characters alike. As tensions rise and relationships sour, the deteriorating health status of George Joestar is revealed to be of DIO's design to precipitate his death and acquire his fortune. Jojo suspects this and meets with the greatest waifu of all time, Robert E.O. Speedwagon, this beautiful gentleman before you. This is in search of proof, which he finds and brings before the authorities in order to apprehend DIO, who puts up resistance, inadvertently killing George, and leads to him eventually donning the mask he discovered turns people into vampires. DIO goes on a mad rampage in hopes of finally getting rid of the Joestars, but Jojo is able to defeat him by placing his life on the line and destroying the only home he'd ever had. Having his life saved and wounds treated thereafter by the woman he fancies, Erina Pendleton, Jojo is able to survive, and not long after, he meets Will A. Zeppeli, who uses a strange technique which causes Jojo's wounds to recover instantly. These effects are brought about by hamon, or ripple energy produced by the special breathing techniques characteristic of the martial art Sendo that reproduces the energy of the sun and can thus harm vampires like Dio, who is revealed to still be alive. So guys, the summary has been way too long already, and I'm sorry about that. We're almost through it, but important information to note is that Dio's never really dead, no matter what anyone tells you. Back on topic! Zeppeli passes on to Jojo the art of Sendo, and along with Speedwagon, the three set out on a journey to find and beat Dio before his grisly dreams of turning England into his dark domain can be achieved. This is the beginning of a long and turbulent tale of the conflict between the lineage of Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando over the course of several bizarre adventures. Now that the scene's been set, what truly makes all of this special? First of all, the resolve displayed by every character is simply unrivaled. Nearly every scene showcases an exhibition on the phenomenal resolution necessary to perform to the caliber required of people with their magnitude of aspirations. Exhibit A. Jonathan Joestar. His model execution of what he believes to be his duty is brought on by a lifetime of preparation geared towards his attainment of the pinnacle of gentlemanliness. Further yet, this endeavor results in his developing questionable selflessness as the result of forcing himself to conform to the lawful good archetype in his early youth. Despite growing to be a timeless hero revered for his exploits in the name of what is good and just, you can't help but think of him as more than just a basic good guy thanks to the character development he receives through his life. Going back to his childhood and meeting with Erina, Jonathan lunges at bullies far stronger than himself in order to fight to get back the doll they'd taken from him. Albeit, after losing the fight, Jojo manages to get back the doll, for which Erina is thankful. But he, upset, dismisses her, saying he did it neither for her sake nor gratitude, but because he wanted to be a true gentleman, saving those in need, and that required the bravery to go into battles he knew he'd lose. Keep note of this, it's important, though he wished one day to be able to win. Contrasting this with his future personality, it becomes clear that he achieves his goal, though this is only on the surface. His entire character now lies within the constraints of what actions he personally deemed acceptable, proving him to be a determined man of pure convictions, while simultaneously a tortured soul, having willingly forfeited his own freedom. Exhibit B. Dio Brando, deplorable from the outset. After running his father into the ground, because he poisoned him the same way he did George, he swears to be rich by any means, beginning with exploiting the Joestars, and shows the conviction to not let anyone impede his progress. He's easily one of the most irredeemably selfish characters to be animated in recent years, with particular reference to his goals and personality in Part 1, Phantom Blood. And this is shown first when he meets Jojo and immediately begins contemplating ways to drive him to mental ruin to better his chances of obtaining the Joestar fortune in the future. 7 years later, at the time of Jojo and Dio's first meeting, after the fight that ruined their home, Dio is shown to be hopelessly utilitarian, barely engaging Jojo and company, who he'd have been able to easily defeat, and instead matching up vengeful minions and soldiers he'd revived against them, denying them even death. Dio is shown to have no reservations about causing others misery so long as it furthers his own agenda and satisfies him. As though that was not enough, Dio then goes on to win Knight's Lot, this town, where he forcibly makes vampires of dozens of the townspeople for the sake of completing his recovery from the night he was defeated by Jojo while amassing his army for conquest of England. At every corner, DIO seeks to use, kill, steal from, deceive, and harm others, deriving an almost carnal pleasure therein, as his arrogance cannot be defeated, and he only further elevates his self-importance. He fulfills the chaotic evil archetype wholly, providing for an interesting dichotomy when juxtaposed against his polar opposite in Jonathan. DIO is an absolute and untainted darkness of the purity of Jojo's heart. And because it is not enough to simply talk about the story's primary duo, I give you Exhibit C. Will A. Zeppeli, who was perhaps the most determined of them all. He's the first of the three here to die, and he walks towards his death the most strongly and proudly of all of them. Many years ago, his instructor in the art of Sendo, Master Tonpeti, foresaw Zeppeli's gruesome death were he to complete his training and learn how to use Hamo. Without skipping a beat, Zeppeli decided to complete his training, however, steeling himself for a death out of strength of his determination to walk out the length of this journey he'd selected for himself. He unselfishly surrenders himself to the powerful fate which never fails to rear its head throughout every part of the story, though in less obvious forms, and allows himself to be blown perfectly by the wind. His most endearing aspect is how he plays out being true neutral, the third extreme. What was thought to be the most plain and bland alignment is so masterfully brought out that the rarely explored angle of working without a goal becomes his strength, and what allows him to help Jojo on this journey precisely because of his lack of regard for his own well-being. So, from these three exhibits, what have we learned? In good, evil, or even neutrality, every character has pure beliefs which plot them on a collision course, making for a riveting experience to watch, especially with it taking place over the course of a mere 9 episodes in its entirety, attesting to the excitement to be found in how fast-paced it is, while not feeling rushed. Even further brilliance can be found in how Araki described the themes of the story as being alive and an affirmation that humanity is wonderful, with characters growing and overcoming problems through their own actions. This is in every way what Jojo stands for and what DIO stands against, as he desires to stand above humanity as a superior entity, often referring to them as various kinds of livestock. Additionally, DIO goes against these values by trying to use others wherever possible, never trying to accomplish anything for himself, which may be why he loses to Jojo in the end, as he's a person who can say, with true conviction, the human race can overcome anything. Let me demonstrate to just what heights a human being can rise. These words are doubly powerful as they embody everything that has been built up to this point, as well as demonstrate how Jojo doubts himself. His words may sound confident, but strength was never his goal. He wanted to be a gentleman, which meant having the bravery to take on an insurmountable challenge for the sake of those who can't. Jojo was scared when he confronted DIO in this final battle. He felt sorrow for what his brother had become, sadness for Zeppeli, and helplessness because he had barely been able to do anything up to this point. But above all, he felt an obligation to become the gentleman he swore to be, and that's what set him up against a foe this far superior. Winning the fight was the icing on the cake, as he'd wished to one day win against all odds. But just by challenging DIO, he'd already won the ideological battle, and the value placed in that is where most of the charm of Jojo's bizarre adventure comes from. Admittedly, other than that emotional and ideological climax, the final clash between Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando is little more than the typical shonen standard in its choreography and complexity. But that was supplemented by the symbolism brought around in the sword used to slay Dio, Jonathan's luck and pluck, received from one of Dio's soldiers, Bruford. In Bruford's lifetime, this was the blade luck he used in absolute servitude of his queen, who he desired to provide with lasting prosperity as her soldier, for she was a good woman, though she met a foul end at evil hands. After defeat at the hands of Jojo, he adds the letter P to its name, changing it to pluck. Though this did not receive much attention in the story, a subtle action such as this had powerful meaning in that though Bruford was a loyal knight in service of the crown, he came to know the cruelty that could result from vile rulers. The sword pluck he gave to Jojo was not to aid any figure of power, but rather strip the power from the dictator in Dio, seeking to shroud England in darkness. By plucking his wings before he could set off on his campaign, the sword accomplishes this beautifully, being the instrument of Dio's death, though it gets not much notice. However, Dio is still alive. Time passes after his fight with Jojo, and as the newlywed couple in Erina and Jonathan set sail for America to enjoy their honeymoon, Dio and his minion of a name I can't remember attack them at sea. Dio has been reduced to a mere head, but in the end is still able to best Jonathan. The ship is rigged to explode and Dio attempts to take Jonathan's body, but Jonathan is able to prevent this with his last breath of Hamon energy, trapping Dio's head in his grasp as he dies with a smile, allowing Erina to flee with a baby she found on board, mounting her escape on a smaller vessel. The ship is destroyed with both Jonathan and Dio meeting their ends. And this end may seem anticlimactic, but was beautifully foreshadowed earlier by Araki's giga-brained use of a quote from William Makepeace Thackeray. To love and win is the best thing. To love and lose, the next best. Though this fated end to the brothers may seem to have been a loss for them both, Jonathan comes out of it as the winner yet again, thanks to his victory psychologically once more. Because he fought so his love, Erina, could live, he felt accomplished in his final moments, with even his future taken away from him. Dio, on the other hand, who only cared for himself, could not experience such feelings, and met his end. Now, other than all of this, what may be the most important part of JoJo's, the aspect which defines it beyond any others, is that dogs have no luck. They're going to die every time. If you see a dog, don't get attached. Just like Danny, who was put in a box and in an incinerator, every dog meets the worst end. That's the most tragic aspect of this thriller. But beyond that, I want to say thanks to everyone who stuck around this far. This has been me reviewing JoJo's Part 1, Phantom Blood. I'm probably going to do a series on every part of JoJo's. I've currently read up until halfway through Steel Ball Run, Part 7, and I hope you guys stick around for it, but don't count on it being too frequent. I'm still touching here and there to see what kind of content is comfortable for me. And until next time, this has been Samric607, logging out.